There's a truth few have the courage to face. Danger rarely arrives announced. It doesn't knock on your door with warning signs. It doesn't wear black. It doesn't carry scars on its face. True danger presents itself dressed as a friend, as a partner, as a protector. And by the time you finally realize who's really by your side, you've already handed over everything of value. Throughout your life, you'll cross paths with three types of people who aren't just problematic. They're fatal. They don't just cause temporary inconveniences or small losses. They destroy. They drain your essence. They annihilate your future. And they do it so masterfully that you never noticed until you're completely emptied. Machiavelli spent decades observing human nature in its rawest state. He saw princes fall, empires crumble, powerful men reduced to nothing, and in all these cases, he identified a pattern. Destruction never came from obvious enemies. It came from people who seemed like allies, from faces that inspired trust, from voices that whispered protection while sharpening knives in the shadows. Today, you'll meet the three most lethal archetypes of human existence: the Illusionist, the Judas, and the Tyrant. Each operates with a distinct strategy. Each exploits a different vulnerability. But they all share one characteristic. They count on your voluntary blindness, on your refusal to believe that evil can wear such a convincing mask. You might be thinking you already know bad people, that you've already dealt with difficult folks. But what I'm going to show goes beyond, because these three categories aren't simply people with flaws. They're destruction specialists, architects of ruin, and if you don't learn to decipher them before it's too late, they won't just hurt you. They'll erase who you are. The Illusionist, the architect of false realities. The first archetype is the most subtle of all. He doesn't use force. He doesn't need threats. His power lies in the ability to make you believe the sky is green, that water burns, that your own perception is wrong. The Illusionist builds alternative realities so convincing that you voluntarily abandon truth and embrace the fantasy he has projected. Understand one thing. This type of person doesn't lie like others lie. Common lies are fragile, easy to detect. The Illusionist works in layers. He mixes truths with fictions in such precise proportions that separating one from the other becomes impossible. He feeds you small truths to gain credibility, and then introduces poison disguised as medicine. Think about that colleague who always has a perfect explanation for everything, who's never wrong because he can reframe any situation in his favor. When you question his actions, he doesn't just defend himself. He reconstructs the entire narrative, making you doubt whether what you saw really happened. Over time, you stop trusting your own eyes and start depending on his interpretation. Or consider that person who makes you feel special, chosen, unique. They bombard you with concentrated attention, make you believe you've finally found someone who truly understands you. But this understanding is artificial. They studied you like a scientist studies an insect. They identified your desires, fears, and needs. And now they use that map to guide you exactly where they want you to go. The Illusionist is dangerous because his attack is invisible. You don't feel the knife going in. You only feel a slight confusion, a small doubt. Maybe I'm interpreting this wrong. Perhaps I'm too sensitive. He's right. I always overreact. These phrases weren't born in you. They were planted, and now they grow like weeds in the garden of your mind. Machiavelli knew that the most dangerous rulers weren't the obvious tyrants. They were those who manipulated public perception so skillfully that people defended their own oppression. The modern illusionist operates on the same principle. He doesn't force you into anything. He just reorganizes your reality until your choices seem like yours, when in reality they're his. The illusionist's victim doesn't just lose money or time. She loses something far more precious: the ability to trust herself. When you can no longer trust your own perception, when your memories are constantly questioned, when your feelings are always invalidated, you become a boat adrift. And guess who appears as your savior, your safe harbor? The same one who created the storm. Unmasking the illusionist, now that you know he exists, you need to learn to see him, because the illusionist only works while remaining invisible. The moment you identify his pattern, the spell begins to break. And there are signs. There are always signs. The first indicator is constant reality distortion. Pay attention. When you confront an illusionist with concrete facts, he never simply admits or denies. You're misinterpreting. It wasn't quite like that. You're mixing things up. He never accepts your version of events, even when you have evidence, because accepting your reality would be giving up control. The second sign is systematic emotional invalidation. When you express discomfort, hurt, or concern, an illusionist doesn't validate your feelings. He questions them. You're being dramatic. You're overreacting again. Why do you always make mountains out of molehills? Note that he never addresses the content of your concern. He attacks your emotional credibility. If your feelings are never valid, you eventually stop trusting them. Third sign. He always has imaginary witnesses. Everyone thinks this about you. People are talking. So-and-so agreed with me that you ... double quotes. He invokes invisible crowds to validate his narrative and isolate you. You're not just disagreeing with him. You're disagreeing with everyone. And since most people fear social isolation, this makes you yield. Fourth indicator. Strategic selective memory. The illusionist remembers perfectly everything that incriminates you and conveniently forgets everything that incriminates him. When you point out something he did, the response is always, "I never said that. That never happened. You're making things up." And he says it with such conviction that you start doubting your own sanity. The fifth sign, perhaps the most dangerous, gradual progression. The illusionist doesn't destroy you all at once. That would be too easy to detect. He tests your limits. First, a small lie. When you accept it, a bigger one. First, he invalidates a small feeling. When you let it pass, he invalidates something more significant. It's like boiling a frog. If you throw it in boiling water, it jumps out. But if you gradually increase the temperature, it doesn't notice until it's cooked. Stop now and think honestly. Is there someone in your life who constantly makes you question your own perception? Someone who never accepts your version of facts? Someone who makes you feel crazy when you try to explain what you feel? Someone who always has perfect explanations, but you leave conversations more confused than you entered? If you identified someone, you need to understand something crucial. This won't get better. Illusionists don't change, because for them, there's no problem to solve. The system works perfectly. You're the one who's broken, in their perception, and they'll keep breaking you until there's nothing left worth saving. The only defense against the illusionists is anchoring yourself in objective reality. Document everything. Record conversations when appropriate. Keep written records. Trust your own notes more than his memory. And most importantly, surround yourself with people who validate your perception. The illusionist thrives in isolation. When you have external mirrors that reflect truth, his illusion can't sustain itself. The Judas, the betrayal from within. If the illusionist confuses you from outside in, the Judas destroys you from inside out, because he's not the stranger at the door. He's already sitting at your table. He knows your secrets. He has your passwords. He knows where you keep the keys, and is patiently waiting for the perfect moment to use all that access against you. The Judas is lethal because he violates the most sacred law of human existence: trust. We can survive without love. We can live without wealth. But we can function in society without a minimum of trust. And when that trust is broken by who's closest, something inside us breaks irreparably. Machiavelli observed that the greatest conspiracies didn't come from declared enemies. They came from close advisors, from trusted generals, from people the leader had elevated. Brutus wasn't unknown to Caesar. He was his protege, almost a son. The knife that killed Caesar hurt not because it was sharp. It hurt because the hand holding it was familiar. You need to understand the psychology of Judas. He doesn't start as a traitor. He starts as a genuine ally, or at least convincingly genuine. But inside him exists a hunger that's never satisfied. It could be envy. It could be ambition. It could be accumulated resentment. Whatever the source, this hunger grows silently until the opportunity to satisfy it overcomes any loyalty. Consider the partner who built the business alongside you, who was there in the difficult days, who knows every detail of the operation. He has total access because you trusted. And then, when the company finally prospers, you discover he was preparing a silent exit. draining resources, copying clients, building a parallel empire using everything you shared. Or think of the person you trained, mentored, elevated, to whom you opened doors that were closed, who swore eternal gratitude. But as soon as they reach a position of power, they not only forget your contributions, but actively work to erase you, because your existence is a constant reminder that they owe something. And owing is unbearable for those with fragile egos, or that intimate friend who knows your vulnerabilities because you revealed them in moments of weakness, who swore absolute loyalty. But when an opportunity arises to gain social status by exposing you, they don't hesitate. Your secrets become entertainment. Your failures become jokes. And you discover that the intimacy you thought was sacred was just information being collected for future use. What makes the Judas particularly destructive isn't just the act of betrayal. It's the timing. He never acts when you're strong and alert. He waits for the moment of maximum vulnerability, when you're distracted, when you're sick, when you're emotionally exhausted. Because betrayal isn't just about gain, it's about ensuring you can't fight back. The Machiavellian truth is brutal. The Judas exists because proximity creates opportunity, and opportunity reveals true character. Anyone can be loyal when there's nothing to gain from betrayal. The real question is, do they remain loyal when betrayal offers significant advantage? Most fail this test, and you only find out when it's too late. The signs of Judas betrayal is never instantaneous. It's built in layers over time. And although the Judas is skilled at hiding his intentions, he's not perfect. There are cracks in the facade. You just need to know where to look. First sign, gradual increase in secrecy. Everyone has a right to privacy, but the Judas starts creating compartments. He has conversations you can't hear, meetings from which you're excluded, relationships he deliberately keeps separate from you. When you ask, the answers are vague, just administrative matters. Nothing major, but you feel the evasion. Normal privacy feels comfortable. Secrets feel tense. Second indicator, excessive performative loyalty. Beware of those who profess loyalty too loudly. You know you can always count on me. I would never betray you. We're like family. When someone needs to constantly declare loyalty, it's usually because they're compensating for the lack of it. True loyalty doesn't need advertising. It simply exists in consistent actions over time. Third sign, criticism disguised as concern. The Judas starts planting doubts about you and other people, but always with the appearance of care. I'm worried about him. I think he's losing focus. I don't know if she's making the best decisions lately. He never attacks directly. He erodes your reputation through insinuations, preparing the ground for when the betrayal becomes public. Fourth indicator, change in language. Pay attention when someone starts using I, where they used to use we, my project instead of our project, my achievement instead of our achievement. This linguistic transition reveals a mental transition. They're detaching from you internally before doing it externally. Fifth sign, testing ethical boundaries. The Judas starts violating small principles to see if you notice a small lie here, an omission there, a minor moral deviation. If you let it pass, he interprets it as permission to escalate. Each unconfronted transgression is a rehearsal for the bigger betrayal that's coming. The sixth and most revealing sign, disguised envy. The Judas often starts by genuinely admiring you, but this admiration rots into resentment. You notice when compliments come with caveats. Congratulations. But ... how lucky you were. ... must be nice to have those advantages. ... double quotes. The inability to celebrate your victories without qualifications is a symptom of envy, and envy is the most common fuel for betrayal. Look now at the people who have total access to your life. Who has your passwords? Who knows your weaknesses? Who did you trust with information that could destroy you if used against you? And most importantly, who on that list shows the signs I just described? I'm not saying to suspect everyone. That would be paranoia and would isolate you from humanity. But don't be naive either. Trust must be earned and periodically reassessed. Total access can't be permanent if behavior changes. And when you see the signs, don't ignore them out of fear of being wrong. It's better to be too cautious with who can betray you than too confident with who will. The Tyrant, the Empire of Fear, the third archetype, is different from the previous ones because he doesn't use disguise. The Tyrant doesn't need to. His power doesn't come from illusion or proximity. It comes from something much more primitive. Absolute terror. He rules through the certainty that disobedience brings destruction, and that certainty paralyzes more effectively than any argument or manipulation. The Tyrant understands a fundamental truth about human nature. Fear overcomes reason. When you're afraid, your reptilian brain takes control. Critical thinking disappears. Long-term planning becomes impossible. All that exists is the urgent need to avoid the immediate threat, and the Tyrant uses this to create a perpetual state of submission. You recognize the Tyrant easily. He's that boss who rules through constant intimidation, who yells, humiliates, threatens, who keeps everyone in a state of permanent anxiety because no one knows when they'll be the next target. He doesn't need to be fair. He doesn't need to be competent. He just needs to be scary enough that no one questions. Or it's that father or mother whose mood dictates the emotional climate of the entire house. When they're calm, everyone breathes. When they're irritated, everyone walks on eggshells. The entire family becomes hostage to their emotional state, constantly modifying behavior to avoid the next explosion. It's not love that maintains these dynamics. It's dread. Or it's that romantic partner who uses emotional or physical violence as a control tool, who explodes in fury when contradicted, who punishes any form of independence, who makes you feel that one wrong move could lead to catastrophic consequences. You don't stay because you want to. You stay because you're afraid of what will happen if you leave. What makes the Tyrant effective isn't constant violence. It's the threat of violence. He doesn't need to act always. He only needs to act occasionally with enough force that everyone remembers what he's capable of. A well-timed violent outburst can control people for months. A public humiliation can silence an entire room indefinitely. Machiavelli observed that princes who ruled by pure fear eventually fell, but while they were in power, they were absolutely obeyed. Fear generates quick submission. The problem is it also generates hatred, and this hatred accumulates until someone finds courage to overthrow the Tyrant. But until that moment arrives, he reigns supreme. The psychology behind the Tyrant as effectiveness is simple. He removes your ability to act in your best interest. When you're operating from a place of constant fear, you don't make strategic decisions. You make survival decisions, and survival decisions always favor appeasing the Tyrant. You become complicit in your own oppression. Breaking the Tyrant is a chains aries. The truth the Tyrant never wants you to discover. All his power exists in your head. Yes, he may have the capacity to hurt you, but the vast majority of his control comes from anticipated fear, not actual pain. You police yourself preventively. You limit your own options. You silence your own voice, and you do all this before he needs to lift a finger. The first step to neutralizing a Tyrant is recognizing the mechanics of control. He operates in cycles. First comes the growing tension. You feel the climate changing, the pressure increasing. Then comes the explosion. He acts with disproportionate violence over something small. Then comes the period of calm, where he can even be pleasant. This cycle keeps you in a constant state of vigilance and hope. You walk on eggshells during tension. You survive the explosion, and you cling to calm as evidence that he's not that bad. But he is that bad, because calm isn't kindness. It's just the recharge before the next cycle. And each cycle you endure, you train your brain to accept that this is normal, that this is love, that this is leadership, when in reality it's systematized abuse. The second step is to document. Tyrants depend on confused memory. They make you question whether things were as bad as you remember. You're exaggerating. It wasn't that serious. You're too sensitive. But when you have written records, recordings, witnesses, their denial loses power. Documented reality destroys the third crucial step. Rebuild your external network. Tyrants thrive in isolation. They separate you from friends, family, colleagues, who could validate your perception or offer refuge. reconnect, strengthen bonds with people outside the tyrant's sphere of control. Because when you have somewhere to go, his power over you diminishes dramatically. Fourth step, establish and maintain boundaries, knowing he'll test them violently. Tyrants don't respect boundaries. They see them as challenges to be crushed. But each boundary you maintain, even when he explodes, is a brick in the wall of your independence. He'll scream. He'll threaten. He'll try to punish you. But if you don't yield, eventually he realizes the tactic no longer works. The fifth and most difficult step, accept that you may need to leave. Some tyrants can't be reformed. Some environments can't be made safe. And remaining in hope of change can cost your sanity, your health, even your life. Planning a safe exit isn't cowardice. It's survival. It's recognizing you're worth more than the hell you're enduring. Now stop and think. Who in your life makes you feel constant fear? Who controls your mood, your choices, your expression through intimidation? Who are you constantly trying not to awaken? If you identified someone, ask yourself, how much of your energy is being spent just managing that person's mood? How much of who you really are is being suppressed to avoid conflict? The tyrant's power is an illusion maintained by your cooperation. The moment you stop being afraid, or at least stop acting from fear, his castle crumbles. This doesn't mean he can't hurt you. It means that even if he can, you're no longer willing to sacrifice your humanity to avoid it. The choice that defines your destiny. You now know the three most dangerous archetypes that will cross your path. The Illusionist, who destroys your perception of reality. The Judas, who violates your trust from within. The Tyrant, who governs through terror. Each lethal in their own way. Each already present in the lives of millions. The question isn't whether you'll meet them. You will. The question is, when you meet them, will you have the courage to see them for what they really are? Or will you do what most do, which is deny, justify, minimize until you're completely destroyed? Machiavelli didn't write his texts to be cruel. He wrote to be honest about what really governs human actions. And the truth is that these three archetypes exist because they work. Because people prefer to believe in the illusion of security than face threatening reality. Because we trust when we should verify. Because we submit when we should resist. But now you know. And knowledge carries responsibility. You can no longer pretend ignorance. You can no longer say you weren't warned. The signs are all there. The question is, will you pay attention? Look at your life now with brutal honesty. Identify who's systematically confusing you, who has total access but shows signs of disloyalty, who controls you through fear. There. And the longer you allow them to remain, the harder recovery will be. The Illusionist can be neutralized when you anchor yourself in objective reality and refuse to accept his narrative. The Judas can be contained when you restrict access and remain vigilant. The Tyrant can be dethroned when you remove your cooperation, even if that means leaving. But all this requires something most people don't have. Courage to face uncomfortable truths. Courage to break with the familiar, even when familiar is toxic. Courage to be alone temporarily instead of remaining destroyed permanently. Life will test you. It will place these three masks before you repeatedly. And each time, you'll have a choice. See or pretend not to see. Act or wait for it to magically improve. Protect yourself or sacrifice yourself in hopes that your goodness will change who fundamentally Koina or Wuina change. Machiavelli understood that the world belongs to those who see clearly, not those who dream sweetly. Those who recognize danger survive. Those who deny it perish. Simple as that, brutal as that, true as that. So decide now. Will you be the one who sees through the masks? Or will you be another victim who realizes too late? Because I guarantee, these three are watching you now, assessing whether you're prey or a predator, whether you're a target or threat, and your next action will answer that question for you. If you've made it this far, something in you already knew these truths, already felt there was danger hidden in familiar faces. Now you have the names, the patterns, the signs. Use this knowledge. Don't be the victim everyone expects you to be anymore. And remember, The only real power any of these archetypes have is the one you give them. Remove trust from the Illusionist. Remove access from the Judas. Remove fear from the Tyrant. And you'll discover they were just ordinary humans using your vulnerabilities against you. Nothing more than that. Nothing beyond that, and certainly nothing you can't overcome. If this message resonated with you, if you recognize patterns in your life, leave your like. Subscribe to the channel to continue learning the truths no one else has the courage to tell, and most importantly, act. Today. Now. Because each day you postpone confronting these masks is one more day being destroyed by them. Knowledge without action is just entertainment, but action with knowledge is transformation. And you deserve transformation. You deserve freedom. You deserve peace. But only you can fight for it. No one will come save you. You are your own savior. So stand up, see clearly, and reclaim your life.